And if you guys have any questions, obviously just unmute and stop me. Don't worry about the chat box or whatever. Just stop me in the middle and let me know if you've got a question. Today we're doing the buyer side, so we're going to talk about the buyer's agency contract, and then I will take you through an actual entering into the MLS. So we will, no, sorry, that's seller side. We'll do the other side. We'll do the actual contract today. So we'll do how to get them employed, and then what we need to do about actually writing a contract. So we'll go through both of those documents today. So I'm going to kind of stand over here on the side so I can see it. If you guys want to see my handsome face, I'll be happy to come closer to the camera. But I'm just going to kind of look at this and go through it as we can. So we recently switched to this buyer's agency contract. It's the one we've been using probably since the fall, but it does not have a place for a seller's name in here. Sometimes people that have done business, I've done this for 30 years, so I've never seen one without a seller's name. Technically, we don't have to have a seller's name in order to convey the contract. We are essentially making an offer to purchase on this particular property address. So that be, or on the address that we're making. So sorry, I'm on the contract. Back that up. I'm actually on the buyer's agency. So the buyer's name goes here, and your brokerage company. Whenever we get these uploaded into DocuSign, we'll have Keller Williams here. But right now, that is what goes there. It's the office name. What kind of property are you looking for? Commercial, residential, rental? If it's land or anything else, you just check the other box and write land or whatever it may be in here. The date that you sign this agreement, it becomes effective. So this date right here at line 7 is the date that this actually expires. So if you're planning to do a 6-month agreement with your buyers, you would put, I don't know what that ends up being, November or October 25th. So whatever that 6-month period is from now, whatever your debt expiration date is what goes here. And it indicates that we're going to do everything we can through all of our powers to try to acquire and use some property. And the buyer's going to acknowledge that whatever we do is sufficient for consideration in this contract in order to get paid. I also like, especially if you're going through this one-to-one with your clients, I really like this line here, 11 to 13, because it really kind of puts them on notice. You're going to refer all inquiries and prospects that you may receive during our agency period from any source to me to avoid the possibility of confusion over our agency relationship or misunderstandings about how we're going to get paid in our compensation. So I'm fine, Mr. Buyer, if you want to go to an open house, but let me know so I can reach out to that other agent myself. I'm fine if you want to go to, look at a house that's down the street. Let me know that's going on. Do not call the other broker. Do not call the other seller. All information goes through me. And you'll hear me say that 2 or 3 times as we go through this actual employment agreement. But I think that's a really important thing to communicate with your clients because a lot of them just don't know that they're not supposed to talk to other people. So just make it abundantly clear that everything goes through me. 14 to 16, if your buyer is okay with indicating why we're looking for property, you can check does, and you can put whatever that reason is, looking to get out of a rental. But if they don't want that information disclosed, you can just put does not, and then you do not have to put anything in that blank. Most often, when you begin working with a buyer, they're not going to be working with another agent. This particular section here says, current representation agreement, buyer either is or is not under an agreement. Most often, you're going to run into it and you're going to check is not. Because again, most often, they're not going to have another agent. But let's suppose this buyer was working with me and they called you and he said, hey, Dakota, Don is just not cutting the mustard for me. Whenever our agreement expires, will you take this over and help me find a house? Dakota can say, absolutely, yes, I will. He can take this particular document over to that client, even though I am still under agreement with them. He can take this over to them, and he can say, okay, you are under agreement, and that agreement expires on this date. So whatever date my agreement expires would be the date that you would put there. Again, you guys aren't going to run into this a whole lot because most often they're not going to be working with somebody else. But if they are, and if they contact you, pause for dramatic effect, do not call my client, but if my client contacts you, then you are absolutely able to go have a conversation with them and prepare this agreement to begin as soon as mine expires. Okay, Mr. Buyer, how are we going to get paid? Are we going to, first of all, if you guys are charging a transaction fee, so you're charging every client $150 or $250, all the buyers, all the sellers, everybody gets charged that because that's how I process my paperwork, or pay my staff or whatever, then you're going to put that amount here. So if that were the case, you put the $250 flat fee here that's due as compensation to me regardless of what happens. And I can either collect that check the day that this document is signed, I can collect that check at the date of closing, which is what I'm going to advise you to do. If you don't collect one, write a 0 in the blank here at 22 and check not applicable. The reason I would tell you if you are collecting this to collect it at closing is because we, as Keller Williams, will not hold this check. It has to be made out to Keller Williams. So you're going to be responsible for holding on to this check until the day of closing anyway. So in my opinion, you may as well just get it the day of closing. That way we don't have Rachel processing a bunch of additional, $250, $150 checks every day. So we're not going to process until closing. So I would suggest you just get them at closing. So again, this is our flat fee amount if we're doing a transaction fee. Now down to what we're actually concerned about. What's my actual percentage that I'm going to get? In this particular case, we're just working for the buyer. So we do not have to have anything that deals with the seller compensation. We want to know what we're going to get paid if we find this buyer a house. Now, it's got a blank here for a dollar amount or a percentage amount. Go ahead, if you're doing a percentage amount, go ahead and write 0 and 0 in both of these blanks, just so it's very clear we're not doing a dollar amount. If you're doing a percentage, I do not want to price fix you guys, but let's just assume that you're charging 3%. You're going to write the word 3 in this blank right here, and you're going to write the number 3 in this blank right here. And during the terms of this agency, and the buyer understands I'm going to endeavor to collect a part or all of this additional compensation from the seller or listing broker. So when they say, well, I thought you were getting paid by the seller, technically I'm getting paid by you, but if I can receive that compensation from elsewhere, then it alleviates your need to pay me. I'm going to do everything I can to try to secure a property through the MLS or through a for sale by owner that will pay me my commission, so you are not responsible to do that. But keep in mind also, if you buy my property and I was only offering 2.5% and you had an agreement with your client at 3%, then one of two things has to happen. You either need to amend this document and only collect 2.5%, or technically your buyer still owes you that extra 0.5% that my client did not pay. So just keep that in mind, that if whatever you collect is different than what you have on this document, you should really amend this document to make sure everybody's clear on what's going on. Now, if my agreement with my buyer expires today, and I have shown my buyer, a dozen homes, and my buyer does not hire anyone else to represent them, and they ultimately buy one of the homes that I've shown them already during whatever period this is, 30, 60, 90, 180. I would tell you, I normally do 90 days. I know Rhett and Adam, I think they both got 180 on theirs. But what this says is if the buyer buys this property that I have shown them during our employment, I'm still due a compensation. Now, excuse me. Now, if that buyer happens to hire another agent tomorrow, I'm out of the picture. I don't get anything. They can hire another agent tomorrow and buy the house that I showed them yesterday, and I still don't get any compensation. So you have a protection period in there, again, as long as your client does not hire someone else and they buy something that you showed them during your purview. But if that doesn't happen, or they hire somebody else, if they buy another house that you didn't show them, or they hire another agent, then you do not get anything. This agreement right here on this flat fee amount, if you happen to collect it the day that this contract or this agreement is signed, it indicates here that if for some reason your buyer chooses to leave the contract for whatever reason, they still owe you, you get to retain that flat fee. I would tell you most often, for whatever reason, if it goes south, you're probably going to move this buyer into another property, so you're going to end up keeping it for the next property anyway. But it allows you to keep it if you already have it. So just keep that in mind. Again, I would still suggest you just collect it at closing and just kind of ignore that paragraph. Okay, when you guys enter into this agreement with this buyer, you are entering into it as an exclusive buyer's agent. You're going to work solely for that buyer with that buyer's best interest and fiduciary things in mind. So that's how we enter the contract. Now, the contract allows for us to be a dual agent. Your client has to give us permission to do that. The way I explain that is, Mr. Buyer, I'm going to do everything I can to protect your best interest to find you the house that meets your needs. If I happen to have a listing that comes up that meets all of those needs, I would like permission to go ahead and represent the client on this side and the client on that side, you as well as the other one. while being very clear, I can't let any information cross the lines that I have not been given permission to divulge. So I can't tell you if the seller is willing to take less, and I can't tell the seller if you're willing to pay more. So I would like to have permission to do that if and when it comes up. I am not a dual agent until that actually happens. So I would tell you, your goal is to get the box yes here, and you guys are going to be designated agents. So you're going to check the box yes here. So I don't know if this is the one where it says it or if it's in the other one. Somewhere it says you are not a dual agent until you're a dual agent. And that's essentially what we're saying to the client is I'm working solely for you unless this situation happens to come up and you have to give me permission to do it. So your goal again is to get dual agency, because if you do have that listing, I would love for you guys to get both sides of the deal. Now, you also have the ability to convert to a transaction broker. I honestly don't believe this can be done because you've already advised this client, you've already directed them, and now you're just going to go back to pushing paperwork. So truthfully, I think you should check no on both of these, because we actually have in our policy guidelines that you have to do a little extra training in order to be a transaction broker, because you can't consult, advise, direct, do anything in any way, shape, or form to help the client. All you can do is put the correct numbers in the correct blanks. So just go ahead and check no on both of those, because you're going to be doing so much more than a transaction broker. You don't want to go back to that point. If you have a situation where the client wants you to do that, then you call me and we'll talk about it and I'll talk to the client. But most often, you're going to stay that buyer's agency. Now, I do like that we're kind of putting the buyer on notice with a couple of things here. You're going to work exclusively with me during this period. You're not going to communicate directly or indirectly with any seller or any real estate that I've introduced you to. So if I take you to 123 Main Street and you realize that you happen to know that it's your friend Kathy from your job two years ago, you're still not supposed to call Kathy about this house. Everything goes through me. Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, we are going to be purchasing this home. So we're going to need in place some financial information. So when I ask you for that information, I really need you to be timely about turning that into me to make sure that we can meet all of the deadlines and get everything going. Availability, this is perhaps my favorite line ever typed in a real estate contract, that they're to be available during our regular working hours. Do we have regular working hours? I don't think so. But just make sure you're communicating with them about when and how you will be communicating. And the how's a big part. I know we're all really good about texting and emailing or whatever, but your client may actually want a voice-to-voice phone call. So just make sure that you're communicating about how you plan to do it and that it meets their needs. And as we talked about before, you're going to consult me before visiting any new or existing homes. And I don't know why it even says or contacting any other broker. Don't contact any other broker. Everything goes through me. So, but you're going to contact me to avoid the possibility of confusion over agency relationships and misunderstanding about compensation. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I am going to show you every house that meets your needs. If for some reason you choose not to go see a house because of the owner's race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or anything else along those lines, then you need to go find another agent, because I cannot by law represent you, because I cannot by law discriminate. And truthfully, you can't either. So just make sure that you're on point with that. If you have repairs that you request to be made, just make sure that you're keeping in contact with the other agent and potentially the title company to make sure any and all of those invoices are getting paid. We just need to make sure anybody that's working on the house that's going to expect compensation has been given notice that the sale is X date, so they need to be able to collect from the seller before that point, so we don't saddle them with a lien on the property as soon as they buy it. I am a realtor by trade. I am not a law, tax, financing, survey, structural, mechanical, hazardous, engineer, or anything else specialized. I can tell you whatever you want to know about real estate, but if you have tax questions or insurance questions or survey questions, we need to find an expert in that area. If you do not have that person, I'm happy to help facilitate that, but I will not be answering those questions for you. Mr. Buyer, I hope we don't get to this point, but in the event that I have to sue you for my compensation, you're going to pay for my attorney fees as well, provided I win. If you guys have any other provisions in here, and honestly, I like to make notes of any specific things the buyer says, because if it ends up impeding our ability to find a house later on, I like to be able to go back and revisit that conversation. So if their other provisions are, they won't live in a neighborhood with covenants, they have to have a pool, and they want ½ acre of property. And then they give you all the insights about, what they want with their house. But if they give you those 3 random things, I'd go ahead and make a note of those, whether it's here in other provisions or at the end under special agreements, just because we might find the perfect house for them that has a pool, that has a ½ acre, but might also come along with covenants and restrictions. So if they come back and say, why didn't you show me this house? You told me we weren't looking at houses with covenants, and that one had them, so I didn't show it to you. So it's kind of a protection for you guys. If there are unusual things they request, just make a note of them, so if it comes up later on, you can revisit the fact, I'm just following your instructions, okay? Minimum brokerage services, you guys are gonna do so much more than this, but this is what the statute says. And if you wanna go have a really good fun read, you can go start reading the statutes right here. But it says that we're gonna accept delivery and present all offers. We're gonna assist the buyer in communicating and developing and negotiating those offers. And we're gonna answer any questions relating to those offers. So again, you're gonna do multitudes more than this, but at a minimum, we're gonna deliver everything we get. We're gonna advise you as to what it means, and we're gonna help you create your response. Because of the fantastic Missouri Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, we can do everything signature-wise electronically. Make sure your clients are aware of that. Hopefully, you're having a face-to-face conversation with them when you're doing your buyer's needs analysis and presentation. But I would go ahead and communicate this with them that, I will communicate with you however you wish to about whatever contracts we get in. But if you want to talk on the phone, we have the ability to have that conversation on the phone, and then you can sign whatever documents we need to via your computer at that point, and it's all legal, even if they're on the beach somewhere else, which they wouldn't be now, but you get my point. Even if it doesn't matter where they are, they can still sign electronically. Franchise disclosure, check this box if it's not already done by default, and hopefully it will be when our contracts are all uploaded. But we are a member of a franchise that just says you can only sue us. If you have a problem, you can't sue the whole franchise. As I indicated, this date right here where your buyer signs is the effective date that this begins. If in our example, we visit back on the first page where my client contacted you and said, I'm not happy with how Don's working for me. Will you take over this contract when his expires? You say, sure, mine expires, let's say today. So your effective date would then be 3/26 right here. The only reason that you would use this blank is, truthfully, in my opinion, is if your client was under another agreement and they had reached out to you. I don't want your buyer to say, I'm not ready to look yet. Let's make it effective next Tuesday. Because guess what? If they meet me this weekend and I get an agreement with an effective date before yours, I win. So I want your effective date to be the day they sign this, unless they're under another agreement. Keller Williams goes here in the realtor name. All that I require of you guys and compliance should require is your signature, your printed name, and the date. Feel free to put your email and your address. I know how to find you if I need to. If you're providing this to your client and you want to make sure they've got it, that's a good place to put it. Title, I don't care about the title. Same thing with the buyer. I need a signature, a printed name, and a date. Okay? So that's the only thing compliance should require of you. If you have multiple buyers, you can put it here. I do like filling in the buyer's address here just because that way I've got it handy and I know where it is. I can always consult this particular document to find it. Now, technically, when your client signs this 4-page document, they are hiring Keller Williams, the brokerage. And then we, as Keller Williams, the brokerage, will designate you as the agent to work with this particular client. So whomever is going to be discussing items with this client that is licensed needs to be on this particular area right here. I don't know why I'm pointing at it because you guys can't see me. I'm used to walking around, I guess you can see me in a little bitty box maybe, but I'm used to walking around and pointing at the screen and there's nobody in the class. So if you're working on a team, any team members that are licensed that will be talking to this client need to be listed here. If you are a single agent and you and I are working together, my name would need to be on there. Now, technically, my name and Jim's name do not have to be on there because we're the brokers and we are essentially designated to talk to anyone about any deal. But for an example, again, if I wasn't the broker and you and I were working a deal together, both of our names would need to be on this. And then Jim or my signature goes here. When this is in DocuSign, this will already be populated for you guys, and you'll just have to put the date. But until that time, if you've got one, you can just send it to Jim or I, and we can sign it for you, okay? And then the last 2 pages, I'm not gonna really go over with you guys, but it just talks about, if I am strictly a buyer's agent, here are the things I am responsible for doing for you. If I convert to a dual agent, here are the things, and I like this section right here when you're explaining your dual agency, because you can show exactly what I can and can't do. That you're willing to pay more, landlord willing to take less, what the motivating factors are, if there's other financing terms, and I also can't tell you, Mr. Buyer, about any previous offers we've had on the property. And then page 6 is the transaction brokerage, which again, you're not going to be doing. Okay, that's the employment agreement. Let me know if you got questions. Unmute, and let me know if you got questions. Oh, we got more on there. Who will join us? Hi, Klaus. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Lilia. Lindsay was already on. And Roxanne. Hello, everyone. Okay, so no questions on the actual employment agreement. If that's the case, going once, going twice. All right, so we've got our buyer, we've got them under the employment agreement. You also need to have the affiliated business disclosure. You will need to have a home, well, actually not a home warranty application on that case. Affiliated business disclosure. I feel like I'm missing something else. I'll think about it in just a second. I can't get it in my head. We've gone and looked at a property with this buyer, and we found a property that we want to purchase. Hooray, let's write an offer. This is where I was going down the wrong road earlier with you guys when I started. You may encounter some buyers that say, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never made an offer without a seller's name on the contract. Technically, we don't have to, because we, the buyer, are making an offer to purchase this property right here. And guess what? We can't purchase it from someone that doesn't own it. So that being the case, we're essentially making an offer on this. If you have someone that is dead set that we have to have a seller's name on the contract, you can come all the way down to where they actually sign the document, and you can fill in the seller's name. I would encourage you not to do this if at all possible, because just because the MLS says that the seller is Jim Smith, the seller may actually be Jim Smith Trust, or it may be Jim and Mary Smith, because we forgot we had to put, my soon-to-be ex-wife on this. So if you put the wrong seller's name here, we're just gonna have to come back and amend it. So if you got somebody that's dead set on it, you can do it, but again, the contract does not require that you have a seller's name. If the property that you're making an offer on exists within city limits, then you need to put whatever that city is here in line 4. So if it's within the city limits, it goes here. If it's out in the county, you can leave this blank. Property address, city, zip, and the county. Checkbox if legal description is attached. I would encourage you not to check this box, because if we don't check the box, then it defaults to whatever the title company finds for the actual deed. And I would rather default to that than you guys put something on there and have it wrong. If you do happen to want to check the box and attach a legal description, say maybe like a tax record, you'll print out that tax record, and then across the top of it, I want you to write legal description, and then everyone's got to initial it. So we know why that piece of paper is then attached to the contract. But again, I would encourage you just to leave that blank if you can. Inclusions and exclusions. I really like this section because this should be everything that your buyer should expect to be in the property. If there are things being excluded, we need to make a note of it, but we should have all of these things going on. Now, please note propane tanks right here. And we've got a new addition here, solar systems. So a lot of the solar companies now are giving a deal. They will give you free panels, and then you've got to buy, and then you pay them off over time. So technically, the seller doesn't own those panels yet. So we've got to figure out what's going on with the solar panels, if they're being paid off at closing, how that's working. Propane tanks, if they're not owned, then they don't convey with the property. If they lease the tank from Joe's Propane, then they don't go with the property. What you need to do then is have your buyer contact potentially Joe's Propane and see if they can just carry the contract over or secure new propane. But we need to make sure if there is that situation, if those tanks actually go with the property. Not as frequent, but you also need to be conscious of water softeners and alarm systems. Most often people own those, but there are still companies that will come out and put them in there for free as long as you use their service. So just make sure anything like that is actually owned by the client, by the seller. Now, if you've got specific things that you do want included, you know, a chandelier in the front room, and even if they've excluded it on the MLS that they're taking the chandelier, you can still request that it stay. If you ask for things like the TV or the refrigerator or the John Deere tractor in the garage, after that, I want you, whatever it is you put in there, and then I want you to put of no value. Because lenders hate stuff. They don't want to be making a loan on a TV and a refrigerator and a John Deere tractor. So we have to indicate that those have no value in the transaction. They're just happy to be thrown in with the property, so to speak. Okay? And if there's things that you want excluded, if you want to make sure that that play set in the back is gone, or the trash in the attic, or we don't want any of the railings that you've put up in the bathrooms, we want those taken out. So you can exclude certain items here if you want to. Or if there are things like we talked about, the propane tank, or the solar, or the softener, if they're not owned by the seller, then we need to make an exclusion of them right here. Okay? All right, so we've done our CMA on this property, and now we're ready to make an offer. So whatever our offer is, purchase price would go here, obviously, so we're making a $100,000 offer. That goes there. Now, seller concessions. Okay, what does that mean? What do we mean, seller concessions? Well, Mr. Buyer, let me show you. Come back here to page 4, I believe. Maybe it's 5. Page 5. Section 10, adjustments in closing costs. This indicates exactly what the buyer is responsible for, what the seller is responsible for, and what we're going to prorate. So that seller concessions line on page 1, if we ask for $2,500 in concessions, that goes to all of these items. If these items don't add up to $2,500, then it will come down and trickle over into the prorated items. The seller is going to pay for these items regardless because they're paying for their own fees. But if they offer seller concessions, then they're paying for these items as well. If that didn't make sense, stop me and let me know. So seller concessions, so whatever that would be. So if you had $2,500, then you would put, ooh, $25,000 is probably a little bit much. Earnest money. This is to me a case-by-case scenario. I do not like giving out earnest money because when things, if a deal goes south, earnest money can get hairy really fast. So we don't have an earnest money account here at the office, partly because of that, and partly because the audit process on that is pretty stringent. So I would encourage you, if you do have earnest money, just make it out to whatever title company you're planning to close. Now, again, I don't offer it. I always prepare my clients and say, we're not going to offer it unless they ask for it. If they ask for it, we're absolutely going to give it to them because they want to know that we're serious. Now, in today's climate, we know that that house in Cherokee School District, we've been looking for 3 months for our client, and this house has finally come up, and we know we're going to have competition. I would tell you to go ahead and do earnest money, just because it makes your offer look stronger. If you know you're going to have competition, I would encourage you to do it. But again, that being said, I choose not to do it as often as possible, just because it does get hairy pretty fast if something goes south. But if you do collect that, then you're going to check that either it's been provided and you will sign the receipt that's at the very end of this contract, or that I'm going to get it within 10 days and deliver it to this escrow agent. Either way, you're going to deliver it to this escrow agent. Now, this line here and this section here, if for some reason they're not filled in, they both default to section 6, which is the title and closing. But I would tell you to go ahead and fill them all in. So if it's all Titan, put Titan in every one of these blanks and the information. But this is who's going to hold the earnest money, is this one right here. And if it's supposed to be non-refundable, then there's a special rider that you guys can use. And the escrow agent is supposed to keep track of that, and they will obviously apply that towards the balance of the purchase price. Now, where are we going to close this property and when? So again, I would tell you go ahead and fill it out, Titan or whoever it is. If it's like Hogan, and we've got multiple locations, you can put the specific location on Primrose or wherever it is that you're going, and what month and day and year that you want to close. Possession of keys will be delivered by your closing. Broker is not responsible for delivery of keys. Buyers to change the locks. And we're accepting it in its present condition, and it should be free of any debris and personal property. We're going to have a right to a walkthrough here in a minute, but keep in mind, if there's still trash in the property when you do your walkthrough, that's not on your buyer, that's on the seller. They've already agreed to have the property, despite ordinary wear and tear, free of any debris and personal property. Okay? If it is tenant, then we've got to use a rental property writer. If you've got, so if you're buying a property that has a tenant in it, and you are leaving them in there or not, you still have to notify them through this rental property writer that the ownership possession is changing. Appraisal and financing. I would tell you, if you're doing any kind of financing, you always want the box at 50 check, because that is your only way to limit this contract based on the appraisal. So we made an offer of 100 grand on this property, and the appraisal came back at 90, and we didn't have this box checked. Too bad. We don't get to get out based on the appraisal. So check the appraisal box. By default, we've got 25 days to get this appraisal done. I'm going to encourage you, when you're making an offer, to make this time period whatever your closing time period is. So if you shot out for a 45-day closing, I would like you to make the appraisal 45 days. If you get pushback from another agency saying we want that to be 25, don't fight them. Just make sure you're keeping on the lender that, hey, we've got to get this done in 25 days. And if something comes up where they have to go back and reappraise, or they got bogged down or whatever, I want you to send an addendum and extend this time period. Because if we go with the original appraisal and they say, you know, you're not going to reach value provided, you know, we still got that roof issue. And then we happen to negotiate that the roof's going to be done in inspections, and the appraisers either may have to go back out there and check it once it's all said and done, and it may not be done until 2 days before closing. And then at the last minute he says, well, the roof's not actually even going to cover it. We're not going to get you appraised. If this time period has already expired, that appraisal rejection does not give your client the ability out, and they would have to, in our example of 90 and 100, they would have to make up that 10 grand difference on their own and perform and close at the closing table. So if at all possible, make this time period at line 54 extend through the closing date. Now, we've got 5 days by default, so we get this appraisal back and it's 90 on our $100,000 house. We've got 5 days to get on the same page with the seller about what we're going to do about that. Is the seller going to reduce the price? Are we just going to pay the extra 10 grand? Are we going to meet in the middle? What's going to happen? And to me, if we can't get on the same page in 5 days, we're probably not going to get on the same page. And if we don't, then everybody goes back to their original position, earnest money is returned, and we're all back to our original place. Financing. Not contingent upon financing. They're doing a non-conventional loan or a conventional loan. So if they're paying cash, it would be not contingent. Even they are allowed to get financing even if they check this box. But by checking this box, what we're saying is, I'm going to buy the house no matter what. I can get the money however I choose to do so, but I can't call you back and say I couldn't get my financing so the deal's done. I'm buying the house no matter what, whether it's cash or financing, it doesn't matter, but I don't have an option to back out if my lender says they're not going to loan me the money. Non-conventional would be USDA, FHA, which would be the ones we use most often, and it shows you right here what the government loan writer is that you need to attach. If you happen to be doing seller financing or assumption, there's the writers for those. You won't run into that much, if at all. And then if you've got a basic conventional loan, you're going to put that here. Same thing if you are doing a conventional loan with your time periods right here at line 67, is carry this through to closing. Because it's the same scenario. If we have the lender that says, yeah, you're approved, everything's great in the first 25 days, and we're sailing along, and then it gets to underwriting, for whatever reason, underwriting kicks it out. Or for whatever reason, your buyer decides this is a great time to go buy a new car. Well, guess what? Now we don't have the financing, and it states very specifically right here at 78, if the loan contingency deadline passes, so if this deadline passes and we have not terminated the contract, buyer remains obligated and must have available funds required to close. So that's just make sure if you get pushback from another agent or whatever, and you have to back this up to 25, you need to make sure everything's done in that 25 days. I don't know that you'll get that done, so you need to be very conscious of that. Down here, you do need to put in specific information, a percentage rate, what kind of, we're gonna get financed, yes, either a percentage of the loan amount or the amount that we're gonna finance, interest rate not to exceed this amount, or amortization term here, what kind of rate are we looking for? And then I always encourage to put all terms to be determined, I can't type, determined by lender. So that way, if anything changes, it's already on the lender, it's not on us. Just because we happen to say that we wouldn't exceed a 4% interest rate or a 3% interest rate, and we happen to get a 10-year note at 3 1/4 because it was such a great deal, the lenders determine those terms. I don't have to come back and amend this that way if you've got this in here. Okay? Title and survey. Typically, if you've ever done a transaction, most likely what you've had happen is the seller has done a title search to make sure that there are no liens or encumbrances or anything like that on it. They have then in turn provided that title to the buyer, and then the buyer buys title insurance to make sure that nothing was missed. So if something comes up out of the blue later on, they've got insurance that actually covers that. Our contract gives us 4 different routes that we can go to actually get that done. By default, the seller's got to deliver this in 10 days. I will tell you that's plenty of time. You can put 15 if you want to, but title companies are pretty good about turning stuff over. So I would tell you 10 days is fine. Now, A says that the seller's going to pay for both the title search as well as the title insurance. The situation where this might be is I've got a first-time home buyer. We're making an offer on this $100,000 house. They're going to actually offer 102 because they're asking for some closing costs, and we're going to ask the seller to go ahead and pay for the title insurance because they just don't have any cash. They don't have any means to pay anything over what they're getting financed. So that would be an example of that you're using that one. B says we're going to split it 50-50. Whatever the expense of the title search and the title insurance add up to be, we'll each pay half of that. Sounds great on paper. However, I will tell you almost never will the title search and the title insurance be exactly the same amount. So someone's coming out ahead and someone's coming out behind. C is the typical way that I described in the beginning. Seller does the search, buyer pays for insurance. Most often you're going to see C coming at you whenever you get contracts, and most often this is what you're going to check when you submit it. And then D says that the buyer's going to pay for everything. So this might be an example of, I've got an investor that's going to offer $85,000 on this $100,000 house. They're not asking for closing costs or anything, and by the way, they'll pay for the title search and the title insurance. Essentially, the seller's not out any money, they're just getting whatever they get at the end, okay? Most often, you're gonna use C. As I said, the front page defaults to section 6. This is where it defaults right here. Who is the title company? Who's doing the search? Who's providing this? If for some reason title company is different than closing, then obviously you would have to have it in both places. Most often, all of those things are gonna be the same place, and they all default to this particular location. Buyer has, by default, 20 days to review the title commitment that has to be provided in 10. First of all, I will tell you 20 days is plenty of time to review a title commitment. You should be able to get it done in about 20 minutes. So, you know, if there's issues, the time frame is nice. If your client is planning to do a survey on the property, I want you to extend that time period in this blank at 95 through to closing as well. Because this states right here that the buyer at a sole option and expense may also obtain a property of the survey to confirm legal description. And then here it says, I've got 20 days to review the title commitment, including subdivisions, rights of way, easements. I thought that's a survey in there too. But essentially, I've got whatever this time frame is right here to review all of this information. So if I'm getting just a title search, 20 days is plenty. If I'm getting a survey, I need to extend that through to closing because chances are I'm not even going to get that survey back in 20 days to review it. So if that time period has expired and I get the survey back on the 24th day and I've left that by default to 20 and I have a issue with the survey, that's too bad. I can't refute it because my time period has expired. Most often you guys won't have a survey, it shouldn't be an issue, and you can leave it blank. But keep in mind, if we are doing a survey, make sure to extend that time period out. And then this one right here just says if the buyer is doing their own search, then the buyer has 20 days to review it after they get it. Same thing, if your buyer's doing a survey, make sure that's changed. But this is if the seller's paying part or all of it, and this is if the buyer's paying for everything. So I've got 20 days to review it and make any objections I have to the seller. And then the seller's got 7 days to either fix it or come up with a solution. I don't think there's a need to change that. If the seller needs 10 days to get something figured out with the city, I would just go ahead and sign an amendment and give them the extra 3 days. I think 7 is plenty because most often they're either going to agree to fix whatever it is or they're going to tell you no, they're not. If they tell you no, they're not going to fix anything. So we got the title search back and there's a $500 lien from the city because they had to mow the ditch. And I called the listing agent and say, hey, what's the deal with this lien on the property? Well, I talked to my client and he said he told the city not to mow that ditch and he was going to take care of it and he is not going to pay that $500. Okay. And then you tell your buyer that they're not going to pay that $500. So technically the deal is dead at that moment because the seller has not agreed to fix whatever you found wrong with the title. So the deal's dead. Everybody goes back to their original position. Earnest money's returned. Property can go back on the market. Now, if the seller does not agree, then this contract shall automatically terminate unless within 3 by default additional days, the buyer chooses to come back and say, you know what, I'll go ahead and I'll pay the city that $500 because I really want the property. So contract can terminate today, the 25th, and then my client has technically 26, 27 until the end of the 28th to say, you know what, I'll go ahead and take it as it sits, and I'll fix the lien myself. So no need to change that time period. 3 is plenty. Hopefully you don't run into this issue, but if you do, your buyer essentially has the last say about whether they do that. And again, if the seller fails to timely respond to my objections, so if they just ignore me and don't even respond, then it's deemed that they've refused. And if the defect in the title prevents us from closing or from presenting marketable title and the seller refuses to fix it, then they're going to also pay for any title search fees that my buyer has paid for. Now, if we had seller concessions where the seller was paying for all my title search fees, then we don't get anything. But if my buyer did not ask for concessions and they've already paid the title company however much money to do some of these things for them, then they're going to get that money back. And then it just goes on to tell whatever things got to be in that title work. Inspections. This is what you guys are probably going to call me about the most, and that's fine. This is one of the things, the hairiest parts of a transaction. Properties being sold in its present conditions with no warranties expressed or implied. Conditions of that property are disclosed. Seller agrees to permit inspections with any qualified inspector or appraiser selected by the buyer's lender upon reasonable notice to the seller. All right, what's a qualified inspector? Your guess is as good as mine, because we do not have any regulatory agency in the state of Missouri that requires any inspectors to get a license or anything along those lines. What the board attorneys have told us is if this is primarily their business, then they can do an inspection. They have to provide a written report with photos, but if that's their primary source of income, that's fine. So if Cousin Steve is a contractor by trade, you can have Cousin Steve inspect the property. And keep in mind, your buyer can even inspect the property if they choose to do so. But in order to request anything, they're going to have to provide written reports and photos. Now, I would tell you if Cousin Steve is an accountant and he's coming to check your property, technically you can still use it, but I wouldn't. Let's put it that way. I would use a main company if at all possible, but it is within your buyer's right to go ahead and inspect that themselves. If by chance anybody that we have inspecting the property causes damage, then we're going to end up having to pay that damage back to the seller. All right, B is what I call the get out of jail free paragraph. Most often when you are receiving an offer, I believe you will see 0 in the blank at 124. Most often when you are making an offer, I would tell you that you need to have 0 in the blank at 124. Because what this paragraph says is I've got this period of time to review additional data to the property, including but not limited to zoning, subdivision covenants, bylaws, rules, financial information, subdivision, taxes, school district, square footage, sex offenders, criminals, or truly anything else. So if you had a client that made an offer and they were out of town, you did a walkthrough of the property for them or whatever, and then they show up within your time period, or if you don't have 0 and they show up within that 5-day time period or 3 or whatever you put, and you drive up to the property and there's a fire hydrant in the front yard, and your client says, I had a terrible experience because I had a fire hydrant in my front yard, I will not buy that property. Guess what? That's property data, they're out of the contract. So I would tell you to try to make that 0 if at all possible, because it makes your offer look stronger. And most often, if you don't have that there, you're going to get a counter offer that says 0. So if your client is concerned with these things, do everything you can to have them check it out before you make the offer. If you are just meeting the client for the first time today and you find the perfect house at noon and they've got to get back to work, but they're really concerned about sex offenders, then absolutely ask for a day or 2. Give them the time you have this paragraph to utilize if you need to. I'm just telling you to make your offer look stronger if you have the 0 in that point. If you need the time, absolutely ask for it. If you don't, certainly make it 0. Kind of the same scenario with closing costs. If your client needs it, absolutely ask for it. But if they don't, it ultimately makes your offer look stronger because the net to the owner is better. All right, buyer may, at their option and expense, obtain written inspection reports of the condition of the property by buyer and its lender, including but not limited to all of these things. So basic home inspection, we've got the rights to do all of those things. Please note, at line 137, the cost and availability of insurance should be ascertained during the inspection period, including but not limited to the homeowners and flood insurance. So that's just a conversation to have with your buyer is, hey, we're under contract, you've got whatever this date period is right here. I'm circling again, there's nobody here, you guys can't see me. You've got whatever the time period is at line 140 to get your insurance lined out. So you need to make sure they're in contact with them. Now, by default, we've got 10 days to get the inspector to the property, inspect it, and get an inspection notice and make our requests. I would tell you to make this 15 days. I think it's a better time period. I don't think you'll get any pushback on that. So I would tell you to make it 15 days to make sure the inspector's got time to get there and that you've got ample time to review the report. Now, if the inspector goes out and says, hey, everything's pretty good, but the roof looks a little shaky and I'm not really good on roofs, I would like you to, you might want to get that looked at. We have by default a 5-day window for specialists. And there's a special form that you can put them on notice, additional time for specialist report. That is best practice. Normally, I just send an email to the other agent saying we're exercising our 5 additional days for a specialist report. If you request your 5 additional days for a specialist report, and I was the selling agent, I'm going to expect a specialist report when you submit your inspection notice. Because this is not a 5 additional bonus days, we just haven't gotten our act together and we can't really figure out what we want to put in the inspection notice, so we're just going to ask for 5 more days. No, your time period to get your inspection stuff done is this time period right here at 140. This 5 additional days down here at 143 is specifically for specialists. So make sure if you can't get your inspection done in whatever time period you put at 140, then ask for an extension of the inspection period. Don't ask for the specialist report, okay? Because buyer may submit 1 inspection notice. It must include all matters unacceptable to the buyer and a copy of all relevant inspection reports and specialist reports. Buyer may not object to anything that is not in an inspection report or specialist report. And you guys just need to keep this in mind when you are making the offer and walking through the house. If you're walking through the house and you can see that the front window is fogged up, that needs to be in your offer. Don't wait for the inspector to put that in, because if they don't put it in, you can't go back and ask for it. So I don't expect you to go in and turn on every faucet and open every cabinet door, those kinds of things. But if you can see it with your own eyes, make sure it's in your original offer and that you don't wait for the inspector. And again, if for some reason we don't provide our report to the other agent within this time period, so if we had requested 15 days back on March the 10th, today would be our, March the 9th, today would be our 15th day. Because let me back up and tell you guys that real quick. If we sign the contract today on the 25th, all of my time periods, day one begins tomorrow morning at midnight. So if we sign on the 25th, 26th is day one. So in this case, if we had signed a contract on the 9th of March and I had 15 days to do my inspections, well, today's my 15th day. If I have not provided an inspection notice and reports to the other agent by 11:59 tonight, I'm essentially saying we're taking the property as is. There's no anything. Uh-oh, somebody's not happy and somebody's not.
What are you guys doing?
Who are you talking to? All right, so we get our inspection report, and then we've got three options that we can do. The buyer can either say, we're satisfied with all the inspections, we're good to go, we don't need anything fixed. We can say that there are unacceptable conditions to be satisfied and how we want those fixed, or that we elect to terminate the contract. Those are the three options we have above line 153. I will tell you, when you receive offers, and most often when you make offers, you're going to see this box at 154 checked. When you check the box at 154, you have effectively erased this number 3. You cannot unilaterally just leave the contract. Checking the box indicates that I'm at least going to give the seller a chance to fix whatever my inspector has found wrong. I can't just leave. If you were dealing with investors that still want to have an inspection and so forth, you may want to leave that box blank. Just know that you may get pushback from other agents, because essentially what that's saying is, if I have 15 days in this line up here at 140, so I've got 15 days to do my inspection, and I don't have this box checked right here. Effectively what I've done is I've tied that seller up for 15 days, and I can walk away at any point. So if I'm representing a seller, I don't particularly want that for my seller, because I've lost marketing time, I've tied my seller up, and now we're going to have to go back on the market because this guy just bought. So if it's an investment property, you may see that, but I would tell you most often you're going to see that box checked. So we've done our inspection within our 15 days, and we've got this box checked here. So we either have to say that we're okay with it or we want repairs. Well, okay, we've requested repairs within our 15 days. Then we have what's known as the resolution period. And what this says is we have 10 days by default. Truthfully, I think that's plenty. If we can't get on the same page in 10 days, we'll either not going to get there or we can extend it if we need to. But it's saying we've got 10 days to get on the same page about what's going to be repaired and who's going to fix it. Or if the seller is just going to give us a monetary adjustment in lieu of making repairs. So we've got that time period to get all of that done. And we need a written commitment about the sellers to meet the requirements of the inspection notice, or that the buyers to accept the property without anything. So again, you've got an option, who's going to complete and pay for it, if there's a monetary adjustment at closing, and if we can't get on the same page, then it terminates, earnest money returned to the buyer. And then if we've got a written commitment by the seller to fix everything, or the buyer to take it in its current condition, then we just move forward. So if my buyer has made a request of 17 items, and the seller has come back with 15 items and sent us the request, and then we come back with, we're over here trying to figure it out. The seller at any point can say, we'll fix them all, and then we're moving forward. We can request 17 items. The seller can say he's going to fix 6. We say that's not acceptable. The seller says, okay, I'll fix 7. We can at any point say, all right, don't fix anything, we'll take it. I don't know why your buyer would do that necessarily, but at any point, you can just say, we'll take anything that we want. Please note that if we do have, excuse me, a monetary adjustment, make sure your buyer's talking to their lender about that, about how they want that done, because we don't want it to affect their loan and have that found out at the last minute that because we're getting $2,500 instead of repairs, that it may affect the loan. Also, some of those repairs may be deemed necessary to be repaired by the lender prior to closing. You guys can just ignore section F down here. That's if we are in more like St. Louis counties and those things up there. So We don't need to really worry about municipalities. If and when it comes up, we will talk about it then. Broker role. I'm going to help you do everything. It's essentially what it's saying. But you're not going to hold me harmless. You are going to hold me harmless. Anything that comes out of this, unless the statement was made by a person employed by me, unless the person that told you that that was right, I told you you had to hire them, or if I knew that whatever they told you wasn't true and I didn't correct it. So, the top section says I'm going to do everything I can. Service providers, you're not going to rely solely on me to do everything. I'm going to help you find people if I am not the expert. And provided everything goes smoothly, that's great. But if there is a problem that arises out of anyone else that was at the property, you're going to hold me harmless unless it was somebody in my employ that told you, unless I told you you had to use ABC Roofing and it did not give you an option, or if ABC Roofing came back and said there's not a problem and I knew there was a problem and I didn't tell you. So just make sure you guys are doing the right thing and you'll be covered on that. Home warranty. Either the seller's already providing one, the buyer wants one, the seller is not providing one, is number one. Number two is the buyer wants one, so the seller's going to agree to pay for this. Or three, the seller already has one in place that they'll transfer at closing. Disposition of earnest money. So I talked to you guys about I don't offer unless it's asked for, because then if there is a dispute, it comes down to this paragraph that in order to release the money, the escrow holder has to have a written agreement signed by all parties to disperse the money. Or if there's a civil action filed, then we got to determine whether it's going to be there, less court costs and other fees. The court can order a final judgment or mandate, and there may be other things required by law. So it gets caught in a nasty cycle, guys. So if you can avoid it at all costs, it's great. But again, if it's needed, absolutely use it. If the property gets caught in a tornado, or there's a kitchen fire, or there's a flood, this is a section that talks about what are we going to do about that. Is the buyer going to take it in its current condition at a reduced sales price? Is the buyer going to take it in its current condition and accept the insurance money from the seller that they're going to receive? Is the buyer going to extend the close date of the contract so the seller can get things fixed with their insurance money? Or does the buyer just want out of the contract? Those are ultimately the end pieces of where we can go with this. So in the event one of these issues arises, knock wood, hopefully you guys don't have that issue, but you do have means of moving forward. The deal just doesn't die because there was a kitchen fire. You do have those options to move forward if you choose to do so, but hopefully you won't have to go down that road. Adjustments, closing costs, we talked about this already. These are the things that the buyer is going to be responsible for. These are the things that the seller is going to be responsible for. And these are the items that all parties are going to split. Now, if your buyer has requested closing costs and you are charging a transaction fee of the 150 or 250 bucks or whatever, it says very specifically down here that the seller concessions can include all of this stuff, but cannot include other expenses associated with clothing approved by buyer's lender, home warranty, title fees paid by the seller, or any brokerage or transaction fees. So your transaction fee can't be a part of that $2,500. The home warranty cannot be part of that $2,500. And these items that the seller is required to pay anyway cannot be part of that $2,500. So just make sure, if you are charging a transaction fee, that your buyer is still going to have to pony up for that particular amount. 1031 exchange, if the seller is going to move their money into a new property to avoid some taxes, we're essentially agreeing to help with whatever that is. It's a couple extra pieces of paper. It's not a big deal. It's no skin off your buyer's nose. So we're just agreeing that we're going to do that by signing this contract. If it is not in the four corners of this contract, it does not exist. So just because you had a conversation that we were going to do this or whatever, if it is not signed by all parties, it does not exist. And this contract may not be changed, modified, amended, whole, or in any part except by writing by all parties. Somebody say something? Nope. So just make sure that even if it says in the MLS that the refrigerator and the John Deere tractor are to go with the property, you still have to cite it in the four corners of the contract where it does not exist. So make sure that you've got everything in here that you need. Defaulted remedies, hopefully you guys don't go down this road, but ultimately if you do, here's what happens. So if we've got a ratified contract, everybody's on the same page, and then the seller decides or doesn't decide, as chosen for, says, you know, hey, I'm not going to get that transfer to Tulsa after all, so I'm staying here, we're taking the house off the market, we're not going to sell it. All right, the seller has defaulted. So the buyer has their options. They can specifically enforce the contract and force the seller to sell, even if they have to take them to litigation. They can essentially terminate the contract by notifying the seller that we're good with that, and or they can still sue them. So just because we've either pursued this because of this contract, or we've let you out of the contract and said, you know, we'll move on, we're a litigious society, gang. Make sure that we know that doesn't exclude the ability to sue them. Attorneys are clever things. They will still find a way in there if they want to. But if the seller defaults and your buyer has had any real expenses, if your buyer's done their own title search or had to pay, have the septic uncovered or paid for their inspection, any of those things expense-wise that the buyer has incurred, the seller's going to have to pay back to the buyer. So back in our example earlier about the $500 lien from the city, and the guy says, by God, I'm not going to pay that $500. That's a great time to have that conversation with that seller and say, okay, you don't have to pay that $500, but you're going to have to pay $450 for the inspection, $225 for the appraisal, and something else for the title work. You're going to end up paying the buyer $900. So why not just pay $500 to the city and get done with this? So if the seller defaults, they're going to have all of those expenses that the buyer has incurred, plus have to get back any earnest money. If the buyer defaults on the seller, same three options. Seller can enforce the contract, seller can release it from the contract, and or seller can sue them. But seller is only entitled to earnest money. So if the seller's had expenses at the title company or whatever, that's just too bad. They get the earnest money and the earnest money only. Hopefully, like I said, you guys don't go down this road, but if you do, that's essentially how we get there. And if there is litigation involved, whoever wins, the other person pays for their attorney fees. Seller's disclosure statement. Either we got one at A, we want one at B, or the seller's not providing one at C. Obviously, I really want you guys to have seller's disclosures gone over with your buyer before you make an offer. If the property just hit the market this morning, the agent may not have the disclosures on there yet because it's brand new and he hadn't gotten them uploaded, and your client's ready to make an offer. You can ask for the time period in there to review that. I think it's 3 days by default. I think that's plenty. Nope, it's 1 day. I would make it, they're supposed to provide it within 1 day of the effective date of the contract. So if we signed the contract and agreed upon it today, they would have to provide those to me tomorrow. And then I have 3 days to review those with my client and make sure everything is okay. Keep in mind also, when I'm making an offer on a property, and when we get back to special agreements, this is where I would put this. But the seller has provided disclosures on the MLS, and they've only checked boxes, the mandatory 4, so to speak. The front page, the meth, the lead-based paint, the landfill, and I can't remember whatever the other one is. So if they've only chosen to check those 4, your buyer can still request that they completely execute seller's disclosures. They don't have to do it, but you can still ask for that to happen. So if you're not pleased with the way the disclosures are filled out, you can certainly ask for them to do more about that. And the seller's confirming all their information is accurate on that seller's disclosure statement, and it won't be misleading. If required by law, if it's 478, there'll be a lead-based paint disclosure. You have the right to a walkthrough of the property, and you have up to doesn't actually give you time, but you've got a right to walk through the property, which I encourage you to do as close to closing as possible, so we can make sure all the seller stuff's out and we can look around and make sure things are the way they're supposed to be. In the event the property is vacant, the buyer has the option to go ahead, and you've got 4 days by default, which is probably fine, to go ahead and have the utilities transferred into their name. Now, the seller doesn't have to do that. The seller's not required, and same thing with the buyer. They do not have to transfer the utilities before closing, nor are they required to do so just because the property is vacant. This just gives us the option to do so. As with our employment agreement, because of the Missouri Electronic Act, we can sign everything electronically. Government governing law. Guess what? If you try to make me do something illegal, I'm not going to do it. And if I think there's something illegal going on in the deal, I have to report it by law because that's the oath or whatever I took as a broker or as a real estate agent. So make sure that we're not doing anything illegal. Notice to the agent is notice to the client. If I receive an offer from you, it is the same thing as if you sent the offer directly to my client. So you should have that expectation as a buyer's agent. If you send me an offer, you should know that I am forwarding that offer as soon as possible. It is not a matter of, oh, I haven't had a chance to get it to him yet. We'll make that date tomorrow. Nope. Notice to you is the same thing as notice directly to your client. So make sure that you're expecting timeliness out of the other agent, and also make sure that you are providing timeliness out of yourself. If you've got government loan rider, which I'll show you guys here in a minute, or anything else that you need to attach, if you're doing an HSA home warranty, a lot of times I will go ahead and attach it right here, especially if I'm asking for anything that is over and above just the standard one. That way I can attach specifically the HSA application that I want for my client. This contract is designed for use in completed construction. If there's new construction, use an appropriate rider, addressing such things as punch items and so forth. So you can use the rider that they have. They don't even have it listed there or not. But what I would encourage you to do with this new construction is use the builder's contract because it will have timeframes already built into it. Now, what does completed construction mean? If it's out of the ground, the appliances are in, and maybe we're waiting on carpet and a paint color, I don't mind you putting carpet and paint color in this contract. That can be covered. But if it's punch list items like, you know, the cabinets and the poles, and all of the little details, those will be much better addressed in the builder's contract. So I would encourage you just to do it that way and not put it in the new one. So if you got one that is under construction, you would put it there. We talked earlier about things that you could put in special agreements, like if I wanted the disclosures fully executed, I could put that in right here. Am I a party to the transaction? Am I direct ownership, or am I showing one of my immediate family members? Immediate family members are your parents, your siblings, and your children. Personally, I put aunts and uncles and grandparents and cousins. I just put people on notice that I'm working with a family member because I just think it's a better thing to do. But you only have to put on parents, children, and siblings. So if you're any part of the transaction, you're going to mark that here. Sources of broker's compensation. Hopefully the MLS is obviously offering whatever percentage that will cover the percentage that you have set up with your client. Not to price fix you again, but let's suppose they were offering 3%, that covers the 3% you had in your employment agreement. So you would have, obviously, the seller's going to pay my compensation. If you were charging a transaction fee of 150 or 250 bucks, we already know that the seller can't pay that. So you're going to ultimately be receiving that money from your buyer if you're doing that. Another example would be, as we talked about, if I had a 3% agreement with my client and the other agent was only offering 2.5% and my client agreed to pay that remaining 0.5%, then I would check that the buyer is paying part of my compensation as well. Most often you're just going to have the seller here, but if you are charging a transaction fee, then you've got to get it from both sides. Brokerage relationship, you guys are going to be a limited agent and a designated agent. Same thing if you're working the seller side, could be limited and designated. Keller Williams here, Keller Williams license number here by your signature, printed name, license number, and date. And you do have to have your license number on that. Even though I'm part of a franchise, if there's a problem, you can only sue me, not my franchise. I'm going to effectively give this information to the MLS of Springfield unless you tell me that I can't. If you are a foreign person, we have to go through special hoops to even see if you can purchase the property. And this is not a legalized alien or resident alien. This would be somebody essentially that's here that's not supposed to be here. Anti-terrorists, don't sell to terrorists, guys. That's the advice I give you there. Acceptance and deadline. You do not have to have a deadline on a contract for it to be effective. I don't have to give you a time period or the contract's not valid. Should you or should you not? I think it's, again, case-by-case scenario. If your buyer is in a sense of urgency, then I probably would put one on there. If you know there's going to be competition, I would probably put one on there. It just kind of depends on the case-by-case scenario. If your client is in a rush, let's suppose I have an out-of-town client and I make an offer at noon today, and my client is leaving town tomorrow. We have a backup house that we could look at 5 o'clock if this first deal doesn't start to go through. Normally, I would tell you to give the other agent at least 24 hours in a response time. If you're going to give me less than 24 hours, just make a phone call, guys, and tell me why. You know, it's going to rub the other agent the wrong way if I submit an offer at noon today with an expiration of 5 this afternoon. And if you call and just say, hey, here's the situation, client's in from out of town, if there's anything you can do to get us some kind of response before 5 to know whether or not we should move forward with this or go ahead and pursue something else. So if it's less than 24, just make sure that you're making a phone call. Time is of the essence. Everything is a 7-day week, 24-hour period. Holidays do not count. Okay? Central Daylight Time, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And again, if we have a contract signed today, day 1 is tomorrow. If you have more signatures than you've got room for, then check this box. Ooh, no, yep. Buyer signature and date here. If the seller accepts, they will sign here. If you have a trust situation where you've got somebody that the legal name or trust or whatever, then you need to print the name of the trust and whoever the title of the person that's signing here. So if Jim Smith is signing for Jim Smith Trust, you're going to sign Jim Smith Trust, and that he is the trustee. Okay? If the seller counter or rejects, they will check one of these boxes and send you a counter offer, which I will show you in just a moment. If on page 1 you did receive earnest money from your client, then you're going to fill this out right here that I have received this check from the client, and then you're going to take that check immediately to whatever title company or whomever is going to hold it for you, and you will get a receipt from them. Get the money out of your hands as fast as possible and make sure you have a receipt to show that you no longer have responsibility for that money. Okay? All right, guys, what contract questions do we have right now? I lost some of you. It's all right. All right, let's look at the counter offer. And we'll do inspection notice. So if the seller counter, they would put, in this case, counter offer number 1, initiated by the seller, street address, city, zip, county, seller, buyer's name, and any items that are changed. It's pretty obvious. I mean, obviously we've got specific things. They can change the purchase price, the concessions, the earnest money, the close date, or as I talked about, the get out of jail free paragraph. If you didn't put 0 and it was left at a default 5, here's where you might see section, I think it's section 7, line 140, or if there's a writer number, should be changed as follows. To be changed from 5 to 0 would be what you might see there. If there's things that aren't specific to a specific line or anything, we're just changing terms, they can put it in here. There's an expiration of this as well that you can utilize. Who's making the counter offer, and then what's the response? Either I accept it, I reject it, or I'm going to send you a new counter offer, which would be, in this case, counter offer number 2, and then we come right back up here and start all over again. And bounce those back and forth until I have signatures on all 4 lines, or both seller and buyer lines here. So once I've got an agreement, then that is our 4 corners of the contract. So we've done our inspections, and we've got our inspection report. We've gone over it with our client, and we have decided, obviously, street address, city, zip, county, seller, buyer's name, and we decided, you know what, it all looks good. We're satisfied with it. We'll take it just as it sits. Then you check box 1. If we have found things that we want repaired, then guess what? We check box 2 and write our laundry list of items in here. The way I normally do mine is I will actually reference this section and page number, or the section number, whatever it is, of the actual inspection report. So as per section 2.6 or 5.1, it's not even typed in there, and then list it exactly as it was in the inspection report. That way, when the seller's looking at it, they can go cite that specific thing in the inspection report and realize what it is that I'm looking for. Now, if we have checked the box that says we will provide a inspection report, then we cannot do this box down here. If we left that box blank, then we have the ability to unilaterally just go ahead and terminate this contract based on the inspection. So we make our request to the seller here, and we submit this over. And then the seller has the option to say, okay, we'll fix everything that you've asked for. We're going to fix only the following items. We will give you this amount of money in lieu of fixing anything, or you know what, we're not going to fix any of it. What do you think about that? And then we have the option to come down here and say, we accept your proposal under B2 above, which would be this one, that they've said they're going to fix the certain items. We accepted B3, which means we're going to go ahead and take your money instead of getting the repairs. We don't accept it, so we're going to make a counter proposal on the cleverly titled continuation of inspection notice, or that we just don't accept it. And this line, this number 4 here, not to encourage you guys to do this, but this is the my client's done, we want out. That's how your buyer gets out right there. The seller, if you requested 15 items and the seller only opts to fix 14 of them, that you can still leave based on that because they haven't agreed to fix everything that you requested. Hopefully you don't play that game, but if you do, you do. And then your buyer will sign here. And then again, if we happen to go on, please hold while I find the document. Here it is. Remind me to open the COVID form if I forget to do that, guys. So if we have requested things of the seller and the sellers come back and we've requested 15, the sellers come back with 8 that they're going to fix, then we have the option to come in and say, well, here's what we actually want fixed. And if you'll note, this box right here is significantly less than the box that we had on the original notice. I always encourage people to reiterate everything. So if the seller has said, we requested 15, the seller says they're going to fix items 1 through 8. And then we come back on here and say that the buyer wants items 9 through 12 fixed. Okay, I don't like the vagueness of whether or not my buyer is still expecting 1 through 8, which technically that's the way the contract reads, is that unless I refute it, it's still there, but I don't want any doubts about what my client is expecting. So in this case, I would put, seller to repair all items 1 through 12 of original inspection notice and just cite it that way. But I would like you to reiterate it. And if you can't make it fit, then you can do C attached exhibit A. And then just type out a page with exhibit A written across the top of it with all of your inspection items if you want to write them all out specifically. So again, is it overkill? Probably, but I really prefer to have overkill and have everybody on the same page. So then we just bounce back and forth, guys. Buyer requests this, either the seller's going to fix it, here's our counter, here's the money, or we reject. Buyer says, okay, I'll take the repairs, I'll take the money, or I will just reject you. Seller, so we just bounce back and forth until we get to the bottom, and if we're still at the bottom, then we come back up and start all over again until we finally get everybody to be on the same page. All right, let's look at and this is a new form, guys. Just not a bad thing to have on here, just so you know. So if we've got a deal with, we got our buyer, so between the seller and the buyer, the property address here, that because of this, we need to extend the close date. So here, if we've already got a contract in play, we can come in with this one that due to the circumstances that this has caused, we need to extend the close date. This says that we're going to extend this for up to 30 days, 30 if none stated, that we can, if it doesn't close within this 30-day time period, then we're all done. We're just not even going to extend it beyond that time period. Or if the closing does not occur before the expected time period because of restrictions, then the buyer just wants out. Or if you have specific things that you want to spell out, you can do it here. Do I think this is a little bit overkill? Probably, but it's probably a good protector for your buyer because that way, we have been put on notice that, hey, we've got some issues, the title company's closed, my lender's closed, but if this doesn't close within 30 days, I'm out. and we can just put them on notice with that, or that we need to extend the close date to whatever time period that is. Okay? I think that's what I got for you guys today. Because you'll have seller's disclosures that are attached, you'll have lead-based paints that are attached. Obviously, submit those with your offer. What questions have you guys got? Don't everybody all talk at once? Do you like the online where you guys can actually see if we're going through it versus being in the class? I'd rather you be here in the class with me personally, but I'm just curious if this is working out okay for you guys.
It's great for me because I can't like always get out and show up. So this gives me a lot more of an opportunity to actually not only see
it, but something you would like to see, even the classes that we have people in person, this going on at the same time, so you can utilize that as well?
Yeah, for me personally, yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I like being there instead, but it is what it is, and I do appreciate it. I do have one question.
Okay.
It is on if you have a buyer and he ends up wanting to look at a FSBO, and what extra paperwork would you need? Or
if I'm working with a for sale owner, I actually want you to utilize the GSBR forms, because the MAR form for permission to show and authorization to show, they don't really like. So because they're not specific. Because in this case, so you had a buyer that said, I want, hang on, let me just get this up here for you guys. If you were representing a buyer that said, hey, I really want to go look at that particular for sale by owner house, okay, that's great. You go up and knock on Mr. For sale by owner's door with this permission to show document. Because this permission to show says, I represent the buyer. Very specifically in bold writing. Broker represents buyer. Undersigned with the property located here, described and just put the basic address here for whatever the sales price is to buyers for X amount of days. And that this is the fee I'm going to receive from the seller. This is where you can actually get your fee from the seller. And this is what this is saying. If you give me permission to show this to my client or my clients for whatever period this is, but I represent the buyer, I have no affiliation with you, I will not help you with your paperwork, I will not do anything along those lines. So that would be the case if you had the buyer already in place. This protection period is just like it was in the employment agreement contract, provided my client doesn't hire someone else, and if they end up buying this particular property within whatever this particular time period is, then I'm still owed compensation. They're allowing me to send some marketing information. Then it's got our basic limited agent duties. I can't disclose anything that you don't want me to, or that you won't. I won't tell any information about you that you don't want me to, and I won't tell any information about my buyer that they don't want me to. I'm not required to verify anything that you're telling me, Mr. Buyer. So if the seller tells us that it's 3,000 feet, truthfully, it's not my job to verify that. I'm happy to help you, but it's not my job to do that. I'm also able to still show other properties. You've seen my broker disclosure form. You can't work with any other brokers. That's not true. Correct. So unless they've got a full employment agreement, they're supposed to be working with me only as this permission is concerned with this particular property. If you happen to default on me, then you're going to pay my attorney fees, any special agreements that you have, and then you have the buyer's signature and your signature here. Excuse me, the seller's signature and your signature here, because the seller's the one that's agreeing to pay your compensation on this. If you had a situation where you didn't have a buyer, but you wanted to try to show this for sale by owner to potential prospects, and you approach the seller and say, I would like to represent your property, even if it's for an open house. I would like to have your property, an authorization to show your property for 3 hours on Sunday. Have an open house. Okay, but I represent the seller in this particular situation. That I represent the seller. So disclosure statement must be completed for the buyer's review. Property address here, same thing, protection period here. In this case, this one has a default and cannot exceed 60 days. What's what's the sales price? I'm allowed to put it out to the public. What kind of fee are you going to pay me? Are you willing for me to put your motivating factors about why you're wanting to move? Can I disclose if there are other offers on the property? This is not an exclusive agency, and the owner is free to deal with other brokers. So you guys can go get this authorization to show from this for sale by owner. I can be on the front porch the moment you leave, and I can get one signed myself. They can have as many authorizations to play in play as they want. Once they sign an exclusive right to sell agreement, those all go away. Because then there's no longer, they don't have the authorization, because then now I've got an exclusive right to this property, and you can no longer show it and make money on it. Then it's the same basic thing, limited agent duties, what I can and can't tell. I'm not gonna verify the information for you. I can show other properties. I may be a dual agent in this particular situation because I both represent the seller currently. And if I happen to find a buyer, then I would be operating as a dual agent. And here's the things that I can and can't do as a dual agent. They either have to, much like the other one, they either have to agree that it's okay that we do that if it comes up, or that they don't agree. Transaction brokerage, you're just gonna check does not. Broker disclosure form, you've got it. You're not gonna work with another broker, although again, you can work, provided I have brought you a client, then you're not going to work with another broker and try to backdoor me. If we default and I have to sue you, then you owe me the money, any special agreements, and then signatures here. The MAR contract, the MAR authorizations show they only have one. And even though it has a stipulation that says I may represent the buyer, it's not abundantly clear. So Jim and I both think using the actual GSPOR forms in those particular two cases is probably the best practice as far as being very clear about whom I'm representing in the contract, in the transaction. Okay? If that didn't make sense, let me know. I think that is what you were looking for.
Hey, also with that, okay, so you get the authorization to show, the seller agrees to your terms, and so you give him an offer, but he says, okay, I'll do the 3%, but that's it. Okay, so basically now you're a transaction broker or agent.
Okay, so you had an authorization to show, and you happen to bring a buyer, and he doesn't want to pay your dual agent fees. He only wants to pay.
So he does, but so basically just want to go through the the offer basically.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with this. The permission to show, much like the buyer's agency agreement that we went over in the beginning, only needs to cover my compensation. Because it's only what I'm going to get paid if I bring a buyer to you. The authorization, I thought that was in here, I'm not finding it. Yep, there it is. So that only has to cover whatever fee because I'm going to be representing the buyer. So as long as you agree to pay my buyer's fee, that's fine. The authorization would work the same way a listing agreement, employment agreement would work, in that what I'm saying is I'm going to promote your property as best I can at this price, and I'm also going to promote it to other agents. So if I am the reason that this property is sold, you're still going to have to pay my commission as well as the other agent's commission. So therefore, this percentage rate right here needs to cover both sides of the transaction. So hopefully you've already had that conversation with them up front. And if they don't agree to pay it at that point, then it's not really doing you any good. Because you can go out there and promote it, but then you've got to promote a property that says, I can't pay you any commission. And that's going to be hard to get done. So this is the conversation you need to have is, if I bring you a ready, willing, and able buyer, it may be from another agent or agency, and we're going to have to pay their commission as well. So you're going to pay my commission for the job that I've done to help secure somebody, but they may be employed by somebody else, and we've got to pay their commission as well. So again, hopefully you've already addressed that fee before we have a contract come into play.
Okay, then one more. Okay, so say I found a FSBO, buyer likes the property, put in an offer, and he agreed to pay the 3%, and then so basically on the contract, on the broker's information, that's blank, and then because he just needs to sign the offer, right?
Correct. If you are under a permission to show, you're not helping the seller with anything. So therefore, you're not really earning a fee from the seller. You are earning a fee from bringing the buyer, but essentially what they're doing, that's the same thing as if they put out on the MLS that they were willing to pay 3% to a buyer's agent. That's what they're doing under this permission. So I'm going to present my offer to the seller, and the seller, if they want help from me, they need to employ me. Because this says, again, very specifically, and I'm going to explain that up front, that I'm representing the buyer and the buyer only. If I bring a buyer that's ready, willing, and able to purchase your property, you're going to pay the fee that that buyer would normally pay me, but I am not going to help you conduct your end of the transaction. If you want me to help you conduct the end of your transaction, then we need to talk about me listing your property. And that's how I would approach that if I already had a buyer in place. Authorization, they should pay 6%, not to price fix you guys, but that's the example I would tell you. Authorization should be 6 and permission should be 3.
Thank you.
Yep, that get it?
Yes, yes, it did. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay,
How long
Gabe.
do you typically make your buyers, like your contracts with your buyers? Like, do you do 90 days, or does it just depend on
I would tell you probably do at least 6 months. Hopefully you find something before then, but that just prevents you from having to come back and fill it out again. And I honestly don't see anything wrong with a year. And especially if it's an investor, I would make them a year at a time because they don't want to sign any more paperwork than they have to. That way, you know, on their renewal date, every 1st of April, you go in and have them sign a brand new one and keep moving on. But as far as general public, most often, if they're serious about buying, you're probably going to find them something in 6 months, and it shouldn't be an issue. But I would make it certainly longer than 90 days if you can, because if it takes me, say, 3 weeks to find you a property, and we make an offer, and we have to extend the close date a couple of times, technically, if it is the 91st day and I haven't extended my employment agreement, technically, I'm not entitled to compensation because I'm no longer employed. Now, my protection period would cover that, but we don't want to have to go down that road if we don't have to. So I want your employment agreement, I always want them to continue through closing if possible. Well, not if possible, I always want them to continue through closing. So I would just go ahead and make that time period 6 months, a year, so you don't have to go back and amend that at any point unnecessarily.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. Anything else, Gabe? All right, I'm available by phone as always. If for some reason you're not in my phone or haven't sent me a text with your name, text me at 827-6275, I think, based on the participants. I'm pretty sure I have all of you in my phone already. So, but if you guys need anything, holler at me. Everybody stay clean, stay healthy, and have a good day.
Thank you.
See you all.
Thank you.